Hello, my name is Rachel. I'm 42 years old. For the sake of privacy, I would like to use other names for myself and the people appearing in my following story. I died and came back with a message I never expected to carry. During my journey to the other side, I was shown devastating truths about what's happening to our children. Truths that have completely transformed how I see everything. This isn't just my story anymore. It's a warning I have to share. On September 15th, I died in the nurse's office at the high school where I teach. It was a Friday afternoon. The sun hangs a little lower, casting soft light through the golden leaves. I had just finished giving a passionate presentation at our school board meeting. I was proud of myself. I thought I was doing something good, pushing for a more inclusive gender curriculum, fighting for the students I believed were unseen and unloved. I even posted about it right before I collapsed. Another step forward for our trans kids. #LoveWins, #vaccinated. And then, everything changed. But before I can share what happened in that moment, it's important for me to tell you who I was at that moment in my life. Not the woman standing at the podium with a loud, sharp voice and sharp eyes, nor the department head who had rainbow pins on her lanyard and stickers all over her laptop. I need you to know the woman behind all of that, because I wonder if there is enough of me in you that you might recognize a little bit of yourself in me. That, like me, you have felt some of the same feelings I fought to disguise. My husband's name is Mark. We've been married for 19 years, legally, emotionally, spiritually. I think we stopped being married a long time ago. Mark is a small business owner, a mechanic with grease under his nails and a Bible in his truck. He used to bring me coffee in bed. I used to write him poems and tuck them into his lunchbox. Now we barely speak. We sleep in separate rooms. Sometimes we argue about politics, faith, and about how to raise our son. But most days we just pass each other in silence, like ghosts haunting the same house. Our son's name is Tyler. He's 16. I still remember the day he was born, how tiny he was, how he gripped my finger with his whole hand. He used to love dinosaurs and blueberry pancakes. Now he barely comes home. Tyler started changing in middle school. He got quiet and angry. Then came the skipped classes, the weed, the way he looked at himself in the mirror like he wasn't sure who he was. I thought maybe he was struggling with his gender identity. I'd spent so much time teaching students to find their truth that I tried to apply the same approach at home. I told him it was okay to explore, that I would support him no matter what. But deep down, I was scared. Not of who he might be, but of the growing distance between us. Sometimes I'd stand outside his bedroom door, hand hovering just above the handle, wondering if I should knock. I rarely did. Oh, where do I begin with my parents? They have a strong Catholic faith. Every morning at sunrise, my mother would recite the rosary. Every shirt my dad owned had a silver cross underneath it. They stopped calling when I began to voice my opposition to traditional values at school board meetings. I initially told myself that it was their loss. However, something in me would hurt whenever I heard a hymn on the radio or smelled my mother's perfume in a crowd. The truth is, I was lonely. I had friends, colleagues, followers on social media, but I didn't feel known. Not really. I poured myself into activism because it gave me purpose and structure. It gave me something to fight for when everything else in my life felt like it was falling apart. I planned events for Pride. I advocated for minors to have access to hormone therapy and for gender-neutral restrooms. I told myself that by giving young people a voice and releasing them from suffering, I was performing holy work, and perhaps a piece of me was. However, I was also losing myself in my own suffering. I experienced crippling, deep-seated anxiety. Just to get through staff meetings, I took medication. After parent-teacher conferences, I sobbed in my car. At school, I used to look at my image in the bathroom mirror and wonder when my smile had become so phony. Have you ever entered a room and forgotten why you were there? I constantly felt as though I had strayed into a different version of my life and was unsure of how to return to the original plan. Maybe you know what it's like to lie awake at night and wonder if you're a good mother. Or to scroll through happy family photos on social media and feel a quiet shame because your own home feels more like a war zone than a safe place. I didn't hate God. I just didn't think he had anything to say to me anymore. The last time I really prayed was probably in college. I remember sitting on the edge of my dorm bed, staring at a dusty Bible, thinking, this doesn't make sense to me anymore, so I closed it. And I didn't open it again. I threw myself into causes instead. Equality, inclusion, and justice. I adopted these as my gospel. They gave me enemies to battle, people to save, and rules to abide by. However, I felt empty even in my proudest moments. I thought I had won something that afternoon, September 15th. I had given a good presentation. The board had decided to advance the new curriculum modifications. I was getting high fives from my coworkers. I felt strong, validated. And yet, when I sat in the nurse's office for my booster shot, I felt a strange tightness in my chest, like something unseen was pressing down. I dismissed it. I gave the nurse a smile. I even took out my phone to share my triumph on Twitter. I recall typing the words, "Another step forward for our trans kids. One's love wins. Gansi vaccinated." I didn't get to hit send. My throat started to close. My vision blurred. The nurse's voice turned into a muffled echo. I remember reaching out, and then everything went black. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like falling into sleep. But before the darkness fully swallowed me, I remember one final thought flickering in my mind. Is this it? Not in fear, but in sadness. Because in that moment, I realized something. I had built my life fighting for voices I believed were silenced. But somewhere along the way, I lost my own. And just as the world began to fade, something unexpected happened. A light, soft, golden, and a garden. But I'll tell you about that in a moment. First, I needed to face the truth about the life I had lived. There was silence at first. It was a complete, engulfing stillness, not the kind of silence you find in a quiet room or on a calm evening. I felt as though I had been lifted out of the world and its pause. In the school nurse's office, I was having trouble breathing. My hands were grabbing at my throat. My heart was racing and the walls were spinning. I heard a cry for assistance. I can still hear the faint squeak of shoes on linoleum and the sound of feet running. Then, nothing. I was adrift. I'm at a loss for words. The ceiling was non-existent. No floor, not a single person. However, I was real. I was still me, Rachel, only without the weight. Painless. I panicked at first. Am I going to die? Is this it? Tyler. What about him? How about Mark? Now what? Then peace arrived, which I had not anticipated. Not the fleeting peace brought on by my anxiety medications or the phony tranquility I used to discuss in my mindfulness group. This was not like the others. I felt as though my deepest self had exhaled, as if my soul could finally rest after 42 years of holding its breath. I glanced down, or rather, I realized what lay beneath me, the office of the nurse. Now there were paramedics, nurses, and a school administrator in the room. "She's coding!" someone yelled. I noticed my lifeless body on the ground, eyes wide open. It was odd, unreal. I wasn't scared, though. I didn't feel depressed when I saw myself in that state. I wasn't in a panic. I felt free. Being outside of your body alters your perspective on the world for some reason. Little details that I had never seen before caught my attention. The baseboard's paint chipped. Near the sink, a paper cup overturned. My laptop has a pride sticker that is blinking and softly reflecting fluorescent light. Then I started to move as abruptly as I had floated out. I'm not sure if I was being called or pulled, but I felt like I was rising, not in the sense of climbing stairs, but more like a feather in a wind. No one was afraid, just light. I left the city, the noise and the school behind. Everything turned to a gentle mist. Then, the garden. All around me, it seemed to dissolve into the sunlight like morning mist. It was a place so real and lovely that I thought I had been there before. like a memory I was unaware I had. Although not hot, the air was warm. Every breeze seemed to be carrying a song, one that I could not quite hear but could still understand. There were trees, tall and graceful, their leaves glowing in gold and green like stained glass. The paths were bordered by flowers I couldn't identify, and there were smooth stones and streams of glistening water. Peace glistened in everything. Here, there were no shadows. Then I caught a glimpse of him. He was seated on a plain wooden bench close to a hill's edge, overlooking a huge, unending horizon from the garden. At first he didn't look at me. As though he had been waiting for me the entire time, I just sat there waiting. I stopped when he turned to face me. Jesus, no one had to tell me. I was aware. It hurt how kind his face was, not because it was feeble or soft, but rather because his eyes were free of judgment. Just love. A love that was so complete and profound that I broke. If you could call it that in this form, I collapsed to my knees and started crying. It wasn't until I felt the release that I realized I was crying. All of it. Not just the tears, the rage, the fatigue, the dishonor. It all spilt out. The pain of losing my parents, the distance from my son, the weight of my broken marriage, the pressure to always be right, and the need to always have a cause. I was undone, and Jesus. He took a while to move. He allowed me to cry. He allowed me to collapse. And he was kneeling next to me when I eventually looked up. He made a spiritual, rather than a physical, touch on my face, a presence, an affection. After a long winter, it feels like sunlight on skin. Rachel, he said, only my name. And I felt totally known at that very moment. Not the me I'd shown the world, the activist, no, not the instructor, not the failed mother, not the broken wife. Only me. Rachel, the young girl who drew angels in her notebook and sang in the pews of the church. The young lady who, prior to becoming entangled in ideology, believed in truth. The weary soul that merely desired wholeness. How long we stood there was unknown to me. Time seemed to operate differently, but after a while, Jesus got up and extended his hand to me. "Come walk with me," he said, and we did. Along meandering roads that were illuminated by a golden glow, past streams that murmured tranquilly, beneath trees that sounded as though they were alive. Something odd occurred as we were walking. Besides us, windows appeared, like floating memories. One depicted me praying before bed with my mother when I was a kid. Another showed me slamming a Bible shut angrily while I was in college. Another, me, whispering long-forgotten promises while cradling baby Tyler in my arms. Then I was there, teaching students about gender as a spectrum, my voice passionate, my heart hurting for no apparent reason. I was unable to turn away. I cried at a few scenes. I was forced to whisper I didn't know by others. I didn't understand. Jesus, however, never made me feel ashamed. "You failed," he did not say. "You were wrong," he did not say. He merely walked next to me, his presence expressing what words could not. I recall stopping once, tears welling up in my eyes. "Jesus, I thought I was helping them," I said. I did, in fact. He gave me a sad look instead of an angry one. Abundant, sacred sorrow. "I understand," he said, "but love without truth causes more suffering." I was unable to talk, since I was aware that he was correct. I believed that I had been standing up for the downtrodden. However, my own wounds had prevented me from seeing clearly, too desperate for meaning to see the harm being done to myself and others. He gestured towards the distance as we came to a clearing. I cannot adequately describe what I saw next, but it permanently altered who I am. Kids, teens, there are thousands of them, stumbling through a gray, misty area. Confusion, not agony. Looking, and that's what broke me. "What have we done?" I whispered as I fell to my knees once more. Jesus, however, knelt next to me again, and this time, he embraced me with his presence rather than his arms. And I experienced an emotion I had never experienced before in that embrace. Secure. I felt safe for the first time in my life. Not because I knew everything, but because the truth himself was at last with me. And I was aware of... I wasn't merely being shown something. I was getting ready. What really altered everything, though, was what he revealed next, about identity, brokenness, and my own part in the confusion. We sat together on the edge of that hill, the garden below us, the gray mist in the distance where the children wandered. I couldn't stop staring at them. So many. Young. Lost. Some looked like they were only 10 or 11. Others were teenagers. None of them looked angry or punished, just confused, wandering, their eyes scanning the air like they were searching for something that wasn't there. "Who are they?" I finally asked, my voice shaky. Jesus sat beside me, his eyes never leaving the scene. "They are the ones caught between lies and truth," he said gently. "They're looking for who they are, but no one told them where to find it." A lump rose in my throat. I felt sick. "Did I do this to them?" I asked. He turned to me then. His gaze was steady but kind. "You didn't start the fire, Rachel," he said, "but you added wood to it." I dropped my head into my hands. The weight of it crushed me. I thought I was helping. I really believed I was protecting them, giving them freedom. Jesus placed a hand on my back. Not heavy, not forceful, but steady, solid. "You were trying to love," he said, "but love without truth becomes confusion, and truth without love becomes cruelty. I called my people to walk in both." "I didn't know," I whispered. "I know." I looked up again at the children in the mist. Some of them looked just like my students. One looked so much like Tyler, it took my breath away. I reached toward him before realizing I couldn't touch him from here. "Why are they there?" I asked. "What happened to them?" Jesus looked out over them, and his eyes filled with sorrow. They were told that their feelings were their identity, that their confusion was who they are, that biology is hate, that I made mistakes in how I created them. I covered my mouth as tears filled my eyes. "They were taught to look inward for truth," he continued. "But truth doesn't begin inside a broken heart. Truth begins in me." He said it with such gentleness. No anger, no shouting, no condemnation, just sadness. "They're not lost forever," he said. "But the longer they wander, the more they hurt." I thought about the curriculum I had helped write, the policies I pushed, the pride flags in my classroom, the speeches, the tweets. I thought I was saving them. I whispered. I thought I was saving myself. Jesus turned toward me, his face close. "You were looking for something too," he said. "Belonging, identity, worth. You thought if you fought hard enough for others, it would make up for the wounds you carried inside." It was like he had reached into my soul and spoken aloud everything I had buried. My broken marriage, the silence with Tyler, the ache from losing my parents, the anxiety, the shame, the need to be needed. Tears poured down my face, but I couldn't look away from him. "I gave you a voice," he said softly, "but you used it to echo the world instead of reflecting me." I shook my head, shame burning my cheeks. "I didn't know how to find you anymore." He reached out and gently touched my face, not flesh and bone, but something deeper. And in that moment, I felt years of hardness begin to melt. "I never left you," he said. "Even when you walked away, even when you used my name to defend things I never spoke." I sobbed. I didn't care if I looked foolish. I didn't care about pride anymore. Everything inside me broke open. "Rachel," he said, "you are still my daughter." That's when I fell into his arms, or maybe he just wrapped himself around me in spirit. Either way, I melted. The pain I had carried for decades, the striving, the loneliness, the confusion, it didn't disappear, but it was being replaced with real love, The kind that sees everything in you and still chooses to stay. I'm so sorry, I whispered, for all of it. He said nothing. He just held me, and somehow that said more than words could. When I finally looked up again, I was different. I felt it. Not perfect, but softer. Seen. I don't want to leave, I said quietly. I want to stay here. With you. I've never felt this safe before. He smiled a little sad. I know. Please, I said, don't send me back. He turned back toward the children in the mist. But they need you. My heart tightened. I'm not strong enough. You were never meant to do it alone, he said. But now you've seen the truth. And when truth is spoken in love, it has the power to wake hearts. I looked at him. Really looked. His face, his hands, the way light moved through him. What do I even say? I asked. People will think I'm crazy. Some will, he said gently, but some are waiting for someone to be brave enough to say it. He stood then, and when he did, the entire garden seemed to brighten. I will go with you, he said. I will give you the words, but they must come from your healing, not your anger. He turned toward me once more. Tell them what you saw. Tell them who they are. Tell them I never make mistakes when I create life. And tell them they are loved. The words sank deep into me. Even the ones who are still fighting you? I asked. Especially them, he said. They are my children too. But they are being lied to. You know the lies now. I looked again at the mist, the children, the faces full of silent ache. My voice trembled. Can I really make a difference? He nodded. One heart at a time. That's how heaven moves. And then his face turned serious, not harsh, just full of purpose. But you must speak. You must not stay silent. My chest felt tight, not with fear, but with a weight of holy responsibility. I didn't want to say goodbye. I didn't want to leave the garden or his presence or the peace that wrapped around me like a warm blanket. But I knew I had to go. For Tyler. For the students I had misled. For the parents who felt helpless. For every young soul wandering in that mist. I'll do it, I said. I'll go back. I'll tell them the truth. Jesus stepped closer and whispered something I will never forget. You were born for such a time as this. And then light, blinding, pure, and the sensation of falling, not crashing, not fear, just motion, like being carried backward through a tunnel of wind and warmth. And then pain, weight, beeping machines. I was back, but I wasn't the same, not even close. When I opened my eyes, the light felt wrong. Too bright, too sharp, not warm and golden like the garden, not gentle like his eyes. There were voices, machines beeping, hands pressing on my chest, someone calling my name, loud and panicked. Rachel, Rachel, stay with us. I was back in my body, heavy, sore, cold. I couldn't move at first. My chest burned like it had been crushed. My throat felt raw, and the emptiness. I felt it immediately, because he was gone. Not gone forever. I knew that now. But his nearness, the kind that made me feel completely safe, fully known and endlessly loved, it had been pulled away like a warm blanket on a winter morning. And I grieved. Not because I didn't want to live, but because I had finally tasted what life was meant to be. Now I was back in a world that felt dim by comparison. But even through the sorrow, I remembered his words. You were born for such a time as this. Speak. Tell them the truth. Love them back to me. So I breathed. I blinked. I whispered, Jesus. And the journey back began. The doctors said I had been gone for 7 minutes. No oxygen, no heartbeat. You're a miracle, one of them said. We've never seen someone come back like that. They were stunned by my recovery. No brain damage, no organ failure, nothing, just life. But I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that nurse's office. The first person I asked to see was Mark. He walked into the hospital room slowly, unsure, like he was expecting a fight. We hadn't had a real conversation in months. I didn't speak right away. I just reached out and took his hand. His eyes watered. So did mine. "I'm sorry," I said, "for everything, for pushing you away, for thinking you were the problem when I was the one who couldn't see." He sat down, silent at first. Then he whispered, "You're back." I nodded, but not as the woman you remember. That night, I told him everything, about the garden, about Jesus, about the truth I had been shown, not just about gender, but about identity, about our family, about what really matters. He listened, he cried, and then he prayed with me. For the first time in years, that was the beginning. I went home 2 days later. My phone was filled with messages, colleagues congratulating me on the board presentation, texts about the vaccine incident, emails asking for curriculum updates. I deleted them, every single one. Instead, I made pancakes for Tyler. Blueberry, just like he used to love when he was little. He shuffled into the kitchen, headphones around his neck, half asleep. He looked at the plate like I'd just handed him a letter from another planet. "You okay, Mom?" he asked, skeptical. I smiled. "Better than I've been in years." He sat, ate, didn't say much. But I didn't push. I just sat with him, asked how his day was going, told him a dumb story about our dog chasing a squirrel. That night, I knocked on his door for the first time in what felt like forever. He didn't answer, but when I opened it slowly, he was sitting on his bed, looking at an old picture of us, him in my arms as a toddler, both of us smiling. "I miss her," he said. "I do too," I whispered, "but I think I found her again." We talked until past midnight, about God, about life, about what it means to feel lost. It was the first real conversation we'd had in years. I called my parents next. My mom answered. There was silence at first, and then her voice, trembling. "Rachel?" "I saw him," I said, my voice cracking. "I saw Jesus, and I'm so sorry." She cried. So did I. We met for coffee the next day. My dad hugged me like I was 6 years old again. My mom held my face and whispered, "Thank you, Lord." Everything changed. I resigned from my role as the diversity coordinator. That shocked a lot of people. Some called me brave. Others called me a traitor. I wasn't angry. I didn't post a manifesto. I didn't argue. I just quietly stepped away. Instead, I started volunteering with a Christian counseling center. They help young people struggling with identity, kids just like Tyler, families just like mine. I began meeting with parents who were confused, scared, unsure how to help their children. I told them what I saw. I told them what Jesus told me, that he loves these kids, that they are not accidents, that their confusion doesn't define them, that there is hope. I spoke at a few churches, small ones at first, then larger ones. I didn't preach. I just told my story, and hearts began to soften. Even some of my old colleagues started reaching out in private. "I'm not sure what I believe anymore," one said. "Can we talk?" My days look different now. I wake up early and pray with Mark. I read scripture with fresh eyes, not as rules, but as love letters. I choose time with Tyler over emails, dinner with my family over district meetings, walks in the park over late-night activism. I still care about people. I still believe in dignity and compassion. But now, I speak truth, not to shame, but to set free. Because I've seen what happens when we confuse love with approval, when we let feelings replace God's design. Children suffer. Families fracture, souls wander, but I've also seen what happens when truth is spoken with love. Eyes open, hearts soften, homes heal. Maybe you're reading this and you feel like I did, burned out, numb, maybe angry, maybe scared. Maybe you fought so hard for something, only to realize you're not even sure why anymore. Maybe you know what it's like to lie in bed, wondering if your family will ever feel whole again, or to look in the mirror and not recognize yourself, or to feel like God has stopped speaking. Can I tell you something? He's still there. He never left. He still sees you, right now. And he loves you more than you can imagine. He's not waiting for you to get it all right. He's just waiting for you to come home. That's what he did for me. He brought me back from death, literally, so I could remember who I really am. Not a label, not a role, not a cause. I'm his daughter, and so are you, or his son. You were made on purpose, with purpose, by a creator who makes no mistakes. I used to think my legacy would be policy changes and speeches. Now I want my legacy to be healing, one child at a time, one family at a time, one heart at a time. I died. I met Jesus, and he showed me the truth. And now every day I live for him.